Welcome to the Intentional Encourager podcast, where each episode brings you compelling conversations and stories designed to entertain, enlighten, and encourage. And now here's your host, Brian Sexton.
Hey everybody, Brian Sexton. I am intentionally encouraged when I see people doing business the right way. And for the last 15 years, Damon Burton and his team at SEO National have done just that. Now you might say, Brian, what can they do for me in my business? I'm going to tell you what they can do for you. They can help you understand search engine optimization. There are a lot of players out there in the marketplace, but you want a team of people that are going to be dedicated to working with you and helping you to understand search engine optimization and how you can show up higher on search engines so that you can bring more revenue into your business. Damon and his team are full of integrity, honesty, decency, and trust. And if that's important to you and that encourages you, I would encourage you to give them a call today at 855-736-6285 or go to SEOnational.com and get a free quote and tell them you heard about it on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Get ready for a dynamite conversation coming up right now on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
And welcome into the Intentional Encourager podcast. I'm your host, Brian Sexton. Thank you for joining us again today. You're going to get to see a lovely background. It's my hotel room in Conway, Arkansas, as we record this. But what you should focus on is my lovely guest who has joined me today, my friend Andrea Sandefur. And if I could talk better, I would have pronounced her name better. But it's Andrea Sandefur.
There it is.
See, we're not going to edit this out or anything like that. It's like, why be perfect and technical and all this stuff? She's the host of the Creatively Christian podcast. We're going to talk about her podcast. We're going to talk about and dive into some other things about her business. She's an entrepreneur as well. But you can find her. We'll tell you how to find her and all the things that she's doing a little bit later. But right here, right now, you can find her on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Andrea, how are you today?
Doing pretty good. It's nice to actually be sitting still for a while in one place. This will be nice. It's been kind of one of those whirlwind days as a mom and doing all the things. So thank you for having me.
I understand. I've probably driven about 250 miles today. So it's traversing the state of Arkansas. So, but yeah, it's great to have you. Let's start here. Take me through how podcasting for you the last couple of years has changed, because I started the Intentional Encourager podcast right as COVID was starting. Okay. And so now we're at, by the time this releases, we're going to be pushing 290 episodes. So nice. Technology has changed a little bit. The quality of the audio has changed a little bit. We've made changes and things like that. But I want to hear about your journey podcasting, kind of what's changed for you. And I don't want to know what the impetus was for starting your podcast, but I really want to know what you have found to be the greatest benefit starting your podcast.
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's fun. We've been doing it for almost 2 years now. And it's fun. We work as a team. I am actually one of 4 hosts of the show. And so it's fun. It's a team effort. We all come from different backgrounds and creative backgrounds. And so we have that many more unique guests on the show. So I think that's something I've really enjoyed when I go listen to the show, because I listen to all the hosts' guest shows as well, as I learn from everyone, no matter their background, their creative work. There's something we can learn from everybody, especially being equally yoked as Christians. There's just something about what we do that we have common ground. Not even knowing each other, we can listen to a conversation and find encouragement. And it's been really fun. I really love every single person I get to talk to. Just I learn so much, and we develop friendships. And I probably may never meet them in person this side of heaven, but I really enjoyed knowing them now. So
I've been intentional about getting to know the people that have been on my podcast, because I think the greatest way, I believe the greatest way you can have connection with people is sitting. So for instance, today I had lunch with a guy that I'd been connected to for a while, but I'd never met. We got to sit across the table from each other and talk and share and things like that. And so that's really cool. How do you do a podcast with 4 hosts? Because again, I would be like, when's it going to be my turn to talk, right? How do you do a podcast with 4 hosts?
Well, we each so let me clarify. So each host is doing an episode at a time. So we're not all like 4 on there at once. But we each, like our producer kind of assigns us like when our next episode is coming up. And so we each have kind of rotate through our weeks and stuff. And it's been really fun to engage with the other hosts just offline and get to know them as well and what they're up to. We're all so different. So I'm a songwriter, worship leader, and then we have one of our hosts, he works in animation, Christian animation. Then we have he's an improv guy, and then we have another new host. She's over in the UK. She's an artist.
Did you all know each other before you got together?
Not at all. Not at all.
So tell me how everybody came together for this.
Yeah, podcast. It was one of those random, scrolling Instagram, probably procrastinating, doing dishes just one evening, and came across this ad that our producer, Jake Doberins, had put out. He started the organization called Theophany Media, and he was looking to start this podcast project, and was looking for hosts to apply. And I thought, I love podcasts, and I like to talk. So I don't know, maybe they would want somebody like me. I'm not sure. So I did everything that Jake wanted for the interview portion, and received a message back from him, and the rest is history. It was really, really fun. Yeah.
Yeah. I just started podcasting.
That's fair.
Anybody and, bought the equipment, and
that's right.
Just asked some friends like, hey, would you support a brother here? And
that's right. Yeah.
Here we are, 200.
It's so fun.
It is. And I think the biggest challenge, Andrea, that I have is just trying to stay encouraged to keep doing it, because life gets it, like I'm out of town, so I've got to pack the equipment, and fortunately everything that I use can be packed in a backpack, so it's kind of cool. Yeah, you can podcast on the go like that, but it's finding the motivation to do the editing and things like that, and do that stuff for yourself. But again, it's getting to have cool conversations like this. Take me to a moment in your podcast that was a V8 moment. Like, see, I'm trying to do. If you watched on YouTube, I hit the microphone and it bounced in.
Good catch.
Yeah, well, the reflex skills of a podcaster. So
that's right.
I mean, it's a V8. Like, take me through one of those V8 moments where you were just like, oh man, I did not expect this.
Oh, there have been quite a few, but actually the one I just edited and sent off, it was really fun to revisit that conversation. So I got to chat with a songwriter, artist, and songwriter and author in Colorado, kind of close by where I lived before moving here. And so it was kind of cool. We had that connect already, just being from the same area. And I didn't know him. Like we kind of chatted, had a little pre-interview, got to know him a little bit so I could write good questions. And but during that podcast, like the recorded podcast conversation, we were talking about how our gifts and talents are acts of our things that we create.
Yeah.
When we put those out into the world, they're like offerings. We are offering a service. We're gifting the world this thing, whatever it is. Yeah. And he was telling a story about how they were on a river in Colorado, and one of his friends, he works with trees. I think he owns a nursery or something like that. And he was remarking on this beautiful specimen of a pine tree on the side of the river, and just couldn't get over how perfect this tree was. and how beautiful, and it was captivating his friend, and the other guys on the boat were like, okay, yeah, nice tree. But
Yeah.
for that guy, that tree was such a gift.
Yeah.
Like, that God created that tree, and who knows, maybe he created that tree just for that guy,
for that
to
moment,
experience and love. And so it was really fun. As we kind of processed that, we started to almost see our own work in the same way, and that God is a creator. He's the first creator, and he offers his creation as gifts of service to us. And then in turn, we get to extend his gifts of service now. And it was a beautiful moment. And I had never, I didn't hardly know this guy at all, but we're sitting there having this deep kind of come to realization moment together live. It was really cool. So that was my favorite recently anyway. So every conversation seems to have something amazing. So
yeah, and here's the thing too that I realize, and we can pivot here on songwriting. I've done some songwriting, and it's amazing when I don't try to sit down and write a song. If I would try to sit down and write a song off of thought, and it's like, do I want to? Here's an example. I'll share an example with you. I sing in a Southern gospel quartet.
Sweet.
Yeah, so I'm a baritone singer. If you couldn't tell.
I can tell.
Well, I used to sing the first tenor part, and then, our baritone left, and so I dropped down, and that's what we call it, drop down to the baritone part. But one year for Christmas, we were supposed to sing, and I'm like, I want an up-tempo Christmas song, and I didn't want to. I was like, I'll just write one. So I came to the guys. I'm like, I think I got us something. And so we sang it, and, we sang it a couple of Christmases later. And I thought, when I tried to write something, it was a little harder for me to do that. When you try to sit down and write something, are you to the point where it's like, I have an idea, I think I know where I want to go? Or do you feel like you really need to have that creative inspiration to really move forward in writing a song? Because I've done worship leading in church. I play music in church. I understand when you were talking about those things. I understand it connects with me. I do understand that. But having written songs myself, I want to know from your standpoint, do you need to be inspired, or can you go, yeah, I got a thought, I can crank something out here and get it done?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I do get that a lot from young songwriters, kind of work with some of the youth in my church, and it's been kind of fun to kind of mentor them a little bit. I still feel like a novice myself. So honestly, I've been lacking a little inspiration recently. Just life has been full. And so when life is full, your creative brain doesn't have as much time to work well. And so but I'm in the midst of a hymn writing collective right now, and I have to submit work in like the next week. So there comes a point where I have to sit down and try to get something down on paper. And what I find is, if I even go through I had a guy recently say, like, if I go through the motions of building that muscle, just working on the craft, even if it's trash, even if it's something I never use, but just that
Hey everybody, Brian Sexton. Prices are going up by the day. We've got to find ways to increase our household revenue. Now, a couple ways you could do that is, one, you could go and ask your boss for a raise. But if that doesn't work, I've got another way for you. It's my friend Joe Hart's program called Products for Profit. Joe's been a guest here on the Intentional Encourager podcast and told his story about how learning retail arbitrage changed his life, and he's been helping thousands of people change theirs. Now, retail arbitrage is simply this. It's taking a product and buying it and then reselling it online for a higher price, and you keep the profits. And guess what? Amazon and Walmart use third-party resellers every day to fulfill their customer orders. I want you to go to productsforprofit.com or productsforprofit.com songwriter.carrd.co. Get connected to Joe's team, tell him you heard about it on the Intentional Encourager podcast, and start making money today with products for profit. And now let's get back to more great conversation on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
It's like when you start to cook something in the kitchen.
Yeah.
It may not be enjoyable at first, and you're just kind of picking at ingredients and trying to read the recipe and figure out, but then you get like knee deep in it and you're like, oh, okay, this is starting to take shape, and oh, you smell that? This is exciting. And
well, in hymn writing, you use a lot of these and thous. Yeah, if you get to a point where you get stuck, you want it to sound like it's about 200 years old.
That, it's feel safe.
Yeah. It's like, well, you were talking about your friends, the guy that was on your podcast seeing a tree. What rhymes with tree is thee.
There it is.
So, if you want
to guys can use that if you need a rhyme.
Right, exactly. It's like, your love is like a tree. I come to thee, something like that.
There you go.
Yeah,
that one's for free, everyone.
Yeah, that's for free. Another thing that rhymes with it. No, let's go here for just a minute, because that is fascinating. I hear a lot of newer, and I'll use that in air quotes if you're watching on YouTube. I hear a lot of newer worship stuff. And if you're not a Christian, but I'm going to take us somewhere here. We're going somewhere here. So even if you're not a Christian, you're still going to get where I'm coming.
Just hang tight.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of times in songs today that it's like, well, we used to always have to rhyme. If you had a line in a song and you got to the end and let's say you were using sweet, then, you would want to say something like retreat or something that rhymed with the last line of that particular line of the song. Like we were talking about with tree and the things like that, free, stuff like that.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel to me like songs today are using that same type of poetic rhyming and that kind of like that iambic pentameter. Mm-hmm. If I could go there, mm-hmm. It almost feels like, my Savior died for me. This is great. And that's like two lines of the song. Am I missing? Is it just, and forgive me for saying this, is it old fart hear me that's like, fuddy-duddy, like, oh man, you're stuck in the 80s, come join us in the 21st century here. Is it me? Or, and it could be that pop songs and country things like to me, if I hear a country song, I'm like, that's garbage, because it just sounds to me like it's like every song that a country artist sings is about getting drunk. And I'm like, who wants to do that? Like I don't drink, but I could just imagine it's pretty terrible the older you get, because it's like the headache is magnified.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, and you have trouble sleeping anyway.
Why are we singing about this?
Exactly.
Why are we aspiring to this?
Am I missing something? Is it just a sign of my advancing age? Or
it's
what
interesting.
What do you see?
Yeah, it's interesting that it actually came up in conversation this morning. I was part of a webinar with Keith and Kristen Getty and Matt Merker, and my worship pastor and I were on there, and that was actually a question that was raised just this morning. Somebody was asking if it's important for us to, have a rhyme scheme in our songs. And Keith Getty's response was really wise. It was really cool. He said, well, it's safe. It's a safe place to be in your writing. But if you were to look at a lot of Stuart Townend's recent writing and even some of his hymn style writing, he kind of breaks the boundaries of those rhyme schemes. And then I got to thinking about, like some of those songs that we sing them all the time in church. They don't necessarily rhyme, but they work. And there's something about them, as long as they work, or if the thought flow works and it's what you're expecting, then it's not as noticeable. And I just released a song last week that I noticed that My chorus does not rhyme hardly at all. Like, I don't think there's any rhyme in it actually, but that's what it was. Like that's the chorus, and it forever will be for that. It works, and it has more of like a bookend effect. I've got the same phrase in the beginning and the same phrase at the end. So there's different ways that you can structure a song, but as long as the flow feels right and it doesn't feel unexpected, then it can work. Absolutely.
Well, and you make a great point, is that it feels like at times that some songwriters, whether they're in the Christian genre, I know I went to high school with a guy that is a country music writer. And, again, the standard pat answer, if you will, is, let's have the 1-4-5, let's keep it in a major key, and let's, and in today's worship music, to your point, there are some songs that are in minor keys, and there's some chord structures that don't really go with, and we could go deep. I don't want to overcomplicate it, because, if you are, if you have a song and you've written it in the key of G, there's a lot of time. I mean, you could go in different places, but people are throwing minors. Like, we played a song a couple weeks ago. The chorus, the verse was in G all the way through, and we get to the bridge and it's in G minor.
Whoa.
Yeah, so which is fine with me. I can transition just fine. But it feels like at times I listen to some worship songs, or I listen, the times that I'll hear a snippet of something in another genre, and I think to myself, what was the thought process behind that? Were you just trying to throw these chords in there because you thought it would be cool? Or, what are you doing here? Is it a byproduct? Do you feel like this? Let's go here for a second. Do you feel like it's a byproduct of today's society, where we're just, we put filters to pictures because, we don't want to show our true selves and things like that? Do you think we're kind of filtering songs, so to speak, and trying to write them in different lenses that we really haven't written? I hope I'm making sense.
Oh, totally.
With that question.
Yeah, and I think, that's something that comes up all the time, is how do you write something original, and how do you make it fresh, and how do you make sure you're not being, already saying something that's been said before? And I kind of laugh at those kind of answers, because I'm like, okay, I think you're missing the point. Like, if there's a song born in your creative mind, that is a unique song. It may sound like a song that's already been written, but as long as you're not verbatim copying something, it's new. It is fresh. It's something that has never been done before, and the world needs it.
Well, if you're borderline copying something, that's called infringement.
That.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's called copyright infringement. We do not recommend. We don't recommend copyright infringement.
Like,
there will be attorneys. There will be lawyers. Yes.
I have used other songs that I love as like a template. Like, what is it about this song? Why do I love the cadence of that phrase? Why do I do it? Is it the chord structure that I love? What is happening in this song that's like, when it builds to the bridge, what's happening there? And can I replicate that somehow? Like, there are no rules against, looking at something and trying to pull it apart and studying it a bit. But I think what's interesting is what I'm seeing a trend in a lot of worship music is it's lacking a lot of theological backbone. And I am so thankful to be led by a worship leader that makes that a priority in everything he writes and everything that we present on Sunday morning. It is so rich, and it is so important for the church to be, in my opinion, it's so important for the church to be singing truth and the full reality of truth. Like, to not be afraid of lament, to not be afraid to sing scripture almost word for word, to look for songs that are full of the narrative, the story, to make sure there's gospel truth in it, and to shy away from I'd call it the fluffy surface level stuff. Yes, there's room for that. Is it going to win hearts to Jesus? Maybe.
Well, we've traded the lyrics for the music, right? I mean, there are a lot of times that if the music's not cool, well, nobody's going to write, nobody's going to want to sing this song.
Right.
Or we've decided that we're going to get our set list for this Sunday off K-Love.
Right.
Yeah. So,
yeah,
I mean, I'm just throwing it out there because, again, I could be construed as a fuddy-duddy, like, oh, yeah, but let's go here for a second. Is there one songwriter in history, Christian or secular, that you'd love to have a 20-minute conversation with?
Oh, my gosh. Oh, I would say Isaac Watts, probably.
Yep.
He was definitely one of the great hymn writers of the faith, but he has so many, I'd call them just pieces of poetry that weren't necessarily even set to music, or they were, but they never became like a mainstream part of the church. And it's really, really fun digging back into his body of work. There are a lot of resources online that you can go find his work, and just even some of his texts. And I love trying to take a text from him and set it to music. That's really fun.
Hey everybody, Brian Sexton. Dreams are powerful pieces of intentional encouragement. We all have them. If you're a business owner, you've probably always dreamed of taking your sales to levels you've never seen before. I've got a guy that can help you with that. His name is Brad Norwood. My good buddy Brad has been on the Intentional Encourager podcast as a guest before, and he is a dream specialist. His company, Dream It Pro, offers incentive packages to travel to places such as the Masters, Kentucky Derby, the Super Bowl, even exotic places that you've always wanted to take your team, but you just didn't know how to do it. Brad's your guy. And oh, by the way, Brad's a certified bucket list coach, so he can help your team members achieve their personal dreams as well. I want you to go to www.dreamitpro.com and find out more, or call him directly at 479-466-6907. And by the way, tell him you heard it on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Let's get back to more great conversation here on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
And it's a good exercise.
That's not a text message. Yeah, that's It's like, wait a minute, this dude's sending. He died. A couple centuries ago. Yeah,
it would be really cool to just hear his heart, and to, because he's such a good the descriptive language that he would use in his writing. I just feel like he would have a depth of faith and a way of seeing the world that would just, it would catch like fire. It would just be so fun to be around. So yeah.
Andrea, for me, there's two that come to mind. I would love to have a conversation with John Newton and say, did you ever think Amazing Grace would become the most sung song in the history of Christianity? You can go, da, 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 and everybody knows that's Amazing Grace. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Did you take me to how you came up with the idea for that one? And it was going to be, and I have three. No,
you only gave me one.
Well, but they're in that same catalog of writers, of hymn writers. You have Fanny Crosby, who was blind and went through all these different things where she lost a child and things like that.
So much work.
Yeah.
She did so much.
And I've met this guy. I'd love to have him on the Intentional Encourager podcast. So if anybody knows Mark Lowry, I'd love to have him on the Intentional Encourager podcast, because I've heard him talk about the house that Mary built, when he wrote Mary, Did You Know?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, you're sitting on the back of the Gaither bus and you write this song. have any idea it would become a Christmas standard now,
Right.
like Silent Night and Jingle Bells and Grandma got run over by a reindeer. But let's take a few minutes and just keep in that line. You're right about songwriting. It is an expression. It can be an expression of sorrow and an expression of joy, things like that. If you were sitting down and somebody said to you, do you have to be happy? Do you have to feel a certain way when you're writing? And it could be somebody's writing a book, or they could be writing something. What's your take me through your process a little bit as you're sitting down to write, whether it could be a song. What does that process look like for you?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I feel like I'm starting to kind of discover what works best for me. Um, a vast majority of my inspiration comes from, and just like a posture, a good posture for writing, it comes out of spending time in the Bible, just sitting with God, talking to him about what I'm reading, journaling a little bit, trying to respond to what I'm reading. Sometimes I'm intentionally in one book. It may be coming up like an event coming up where that's what they're focused on. But a lot of times it's just I'm reading along with what we're doing as a church family, maybe our sermon series, and I'm wanting to respond a little bit to what I'm learning and feeling on Sunday mornings. And but I feel like the best posture, the best heart posture I can gain is through time in the Word first before I tackle writing anything creative, anything musically, especially. Back when we were, as a church, we were writing through the book of Psalms. We were writing music to kind of go along with all of the Psalms in the book of Psalms. We started with Psalm 1 and went through all the way to 150. And I helped out with that project a bit. That was probably my favorite songwriting, honestly, to take a psalm and either work with somebody else's lyrical paraphrase or develop my own, because you really get to know the scripture when you are having to set it to melody. And I loved those sessions of writing.
Yeah.
They were so rich, and I would see the psalm completely afresh. Of course, when you spend that much time with anything, you get to know it that much better. And I feel like some of the psalm settings I've written are probably some of my better work, just because of that, again, that heart posture. It was there. It happened because I was spending time with the Lord of my mission. And I like to think that I can do my best work when I've got the co-writer, the best co-writer in the world, the Holy Spirit. So yeah, I find that's probably the best way to really get my creative juices flowing, and to be intentional about spending time with God.
Our worship team rejected my last submission.
Uh-oh.
It was called Sit Down and Shut Up.
Oh, well,
And spend time with the Lord. That was the next part, but they couldn't get past
we got to work on your titles.
Well, they just couldn't get past Sit Down and Shut Up, Well,
it's catchy.
But let's finish here. This is really good. We could go for hours, but let's finish here, because you want to try to be clever in writing. You want to try to have a real clever thought and get people to think of something in a different way. Like I didn't know that about you. That is something that's but there could be a song there, and it talks about, you could talk about finding a deeper walk with the Lord. Like, I didn't know that about you. Or you could just take a catchphrase, just any type of catchphrase, and turn it into something. Where do you find song ideas? Because I know for me, I might have heard something, I'm like, man, that'd be a cool song. Things like that. My dad wrote a song years ago that I helped him co-write, and it was above the exit to our church, and it just said "Faith makes things happen," and it was just like, yeah, boom, there it is. For you, where do you get those ideas?
Yeah, it's a good question. They seem to come from everywhere. It's usually something I've read in scripture, or my latest project, it's called Shepherd King. That combination of the two characteristics of Jesus it really seemed almost like an oxymoron that he's both shepherd and king. And the original version of the song actually said sovereign king. And I was kind of going through some coaching, and one of the coaches mentioned, I know what you mean by sovereign, but I think there's a dimension to this song that you're missing. Your lyrics are much more Psalm 23-esque. Maybe tap into that a bit more. And that's where Shepherd came in, because, as I started to sink back into that psalm and really pull the rest of my content from there, that's kind of how that was born. But it's really fun to kind of ride along with God on songwriting, because as he teaches me things, or as he brings something to mind, I get to trust that it's something he wants me to dig deeper into understanding. And with the Psalms, what in a psalm is sticking out to me? What's a phrase that I just can't quite get over, or what stands out the most? And trying to circle back to that and make that the focus of a piece is really fun. It's a fun process. So
that's so cool. This has been a fun conversation, and again, we'll have part 2 of our conversation where Andrea tells her story. But Andrea, tell folks where they can connect with you, how they can find your work, where they can find the Creatively Christian podcast.
Yeah, awesome. Well, yes, Creatively Christian podcast. You can find that under theophanymedia.com. Jake's got a few projects on that website, but the podcast is definitely one of them. I have a website. I trust Brian will type this out for you because my last name's a little different, but it's AndreaSandefurmusic.com. And I'm on Facebook and Instagram. I tweet a little bit, but I'm not as active there, but definitely Facebook and Instagram. I've got Andrea Sandefur Music Facebook page, and try to be active on there as much as I can. But and then I've got just one single out on streaming platforms plus a Christmas album, which is really fun. Now it's like time to listen to Christmas music again. So that's just the gift that keeps on giving. So it's fun to connect with people and be able to share that music out there. So
my latest Christmas single is called "You're in the Wrong House, Santa." No, I'm kidding. That would be an interesting
hey, there it
song.
is.
Yeah. Andrea Sandefur, I so appreciate it. This has been fun. I appreciate you joining me on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
My thanks as always to producer Bryce Sexton and technical advisor Matt Means. And of course, the ultimate thanks goes to the Lord Jesus Christ, who provides intentional encouragement every day through his word. If you're not subscribed to the Intentional Encourager podcast, hit the subscribe button wherever you get podcasts so you don't miss an exciting episode where you can get encouraged and stay encouraged. And remember, anyone, anywhere, at any time, any place can be an intentional encourager.